engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the Minot State Professional Communications Department proudly brings to you the Striha Sports Podcast with your host, Parker Striha. Hello, and welcome back to the Striha Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Parker Striha, and on today's episode, I'm going to be talking through my 2023-2024 NFL record predictions for the NFC. I'm by no means professional, but I do love talking about sports, so thank you for joining me. Just a quick disclaimer as we get into this. These record predictions are extremely hard to do. Injuries are going to happen, players will be traded or released, coaches will be fired. There's a lot of different factors that go into these that will make these teams stronger, make them weaker. So, these are just kind of rough guesses, and these are all my opinions. And I know I'm going to have a team going 12-5 or 13-3 or 13-4, I should say, that'll finish with 5 wins or that'll have a really bad season and vice versa. But that's just how this goes. So, getting right into it, we're going to start off with the NFC North, and we are going to start off with my favorite team, the Green Bay Packers. Now, this may be a biased pick when I get to it, but last season, the Packers finished 8-9 and were third in the NFC North, just ahead of the Bears, or a couple games ahead of the Bears, but whatever, they were third out of the 4 teams in the division. And this season, after looking through all of their games, and I can't remember the website I used, but let me see if I can find it quick. I think it was, yes, next.playoffpredictors.com. So what I used, I went through every single game for every NFL team, and that's how I came out to all these records. And I'm going to be doing a video later on that'll be coming out maybe a couple days after this one about the Packers as a whole. But after going through their schedule, I have them coming out with a record of 12-5 at best, probably. I'm sticking with 12-5. I think this team is a lot more talented than people give them credit for. The defense obviously was underwhelming last year, definitely underperformed what everyone expected them to. The team as a whole, I guess, underperformed. But I really like this team. I'm really high on Jordan Love personally. The offense may take some time to get into their groove, but I think the offense has potential to be really good this year, and I think it could be better than teams like Chicago and like Minnesota. But I will say now, I have Green Bay finishing 12-5, and that will be first in the NFC North. So next off, I have the Chicago Bears, who finished 3-14 last season and finished 4th in the division. Unfortunately, Bears fans, you aren't going to get much better, in my opinion. I think Justin Fields still has a lot of question marks. I think the roster as a whole has a lot of question marks, even after they just recently signed Yannick Ngakoue. The team has potential for the future. I will give them that. I think they could be really good in a year or two, but Justin Fields has a lot more to prove as a passer, in my opinion. He's not going to win a Super Bowl by being the quarterback he is now, and you can say that about any young quarterback, but I'm just not that high on the Bears. I have them finishing 4-13, one game better than last year. This team is still really bad in my opinion, but they are on the up and up, but I have them finishing 4th in the NFC North. Bars. So next off, I have the Minnesota Vikings, who I guess I maybe was not on record of, but I will put it on record now. I think they were a very, very, very fraudulent 13-4 team last season when they finished first in the NFC North. And I think they are going to fall off a cliff this season compared to what they had last year. A lot of their key guys, they lost Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, Eric Kendricks, Dalvin Tomlinson, Zadarius Smith. Like guys that, well, yes, they are all old. They helped the talent of that roster in at least some way, especially Zadarius Smith and Dalvin Tomlinson, who were really, really big losses for this team, in my opinion. I think their defense is going to be really, really bad. Like, really bad. Could be one of the worst defenses in the league. They still have some guys on that team that have a bright future. Obviously, I'm kind of high on Andrew Booth and Lewis Cine, but they both have a lot to prove still. And then I'm also a huge fan of Danielle Hunter, but There's talks that he may be traded eventually, so I don't really know. I have them finishing 7-10 this season, which is third in the NFC North. But I think the Vikings, truthfully, are heading for at least somewhat of a rebuild. I don't really like I said, I don't like their defense. They need a lot of younger talent on that defense. The offense has potential, but Kirk Cousins is getting up there in age, and this could be his last season in Minnesota, as he is going to be a free agent after this year. And that is going to be a huge hole that they will have to fill, because I do think Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. But nonetheless, let's move on to the Detroit Lions. Finished 9-8 last season, which was second in the NFC North. And I know this is the team that a lot of people are predicting to be really good. They're predicting them to win the NFC North by a landslide. And I do like the Lions. I like a lot of their players. I think they're a really talented young team, and I think they could be good for years to come. But I have them finishing 10-7 this year, which is second in the NFC North. But that will still make them a playoff team when I get to the playoffs at the end of talking through each team. So, I mean, that's a win for Detroit, but at the same time, they're not going to win the division, in my opinion, like everyone says they will. Moving on to the NFC South, starting with the Atlanta Falcons, who finished 7-10 last season, which was fourth in the division. Now, this whole division is a weird one, because last year it was 3 teams, I believe, tied for second in the division. I think every team other than the Bucs was 7-10, and the Bucs were 8-9, who I'll talk about next. So, I mean, I think this division is wide open for any of these teams to sneak in and win it. But I have the Falcons finishing 8-9 this season, which last year would have won the division. Obviously, they didn't. But that 8-9 record is second in the NFC South this year. I really like the talent they've brought in, but at the same time, I think they, as a team, have a lot to prove. Bijan Robinson could definitely, I don't want to say he'll be a bust, because I think he'll be really good, but he could be slow starting out. Desmond Ridder could be really bad this year. You don't really know. There's a lot of factors that could go into it, but I have them finishing 8-9. Moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the winners of the NFC South last season with an 8-9 record. I have them falling off a little bit from last season, just because, you're losing Tom Brady, and that defense is getting older. The offense is getting older also. And obviously Baker Mayfield and or Kyle Trask as your starting quarterback. I'm not super high on that. I don't think that is a good 1-2 at quarterback at all. I think Baker had a couple good seasons, but I don't know if he has much more of a future in the NFL. I loved him in college and those first couple years in Cleveland, but it's been downhill since. I have them finishing 5-12, which is fourth in the NFC South. Then moving on to the New Orleans Saints, who finished 7-10 last season, which was third in the division. I have them finishing 7-10 again this season, which will also be third in the division again. I like the team, but there are a lot of question marks. Obviously, Derek Carr at quarterback. I'm a big Carr fan, but at the same time, you don't really know what you're getting with him. Alvin Kamara's going to be suspended for a couple games. Michael Thomas can't stay healthy. That defense, I don't know who they're putting out there on that defensive line or for that front seven in general. Obviously, Cam Jordan, I believe, just signed an extension or something just happened with his contract, so he'll be staying there for at least a couple more years. But he's getting up there in age. Tyrann Mathieu's getting up there in age. Demario Davis is getting up there in age. So this is a team that I think is kind of paying for their sins from a couple years ago with all that restructuring. They're expensive. They're old. And I think they're also probably going to be heading for a rebuild soon. But yes, I have them finishing 7-10. Next and last in the NFC South, I have the Carolina Panthers, who finished 7-10 last season, which was second in the division. And this year, I have them finishing 9-8, which is first in the NFC South. I'm really high on this roster. I think as long as Bryce Young can show that he will be a promising, good quarterback in the league, which I think he will. I think Frank Reich will really elevate him. And I think this team could be a sneaky good team. They could easily be, I think, 11 wins as a team. They just signed Justin Houston a couple days ago, or maybe even yesterday. But I think that's a really good signing too, because outside of Brian Burns, I don't know what you really have at edge rusher, and I don't think they know what they have at edge rusher. because Amari Barno hasn't really shown anything. I think that's his name. Yeturgos Matos hasn't really shown enough to be slotted right into that starting spot. And I think Justin Houston, just even if he doesn't start, even if he doesn't have this amazing season like he would have had a couple years ago, I think he is one of the best veteran presences that you can have in the league. And for a young team, I think he will help outstandingly. But yes, I have them finishing 9-8 and winning their division. Moving on to the NFC West, starting with the San Francisco 49ers. They finished 13-4 last season, which was first in their division. And this year I have them winning their division again, but with a record of 12-5. I think their roster is good. I think that front seven is really good, especially with the signing of Javon Hargrave. But I do have a lot of questions at that, or for that quarterback position. I don't think Brock Purdy is very good. Obviously, he won a lot of games last year, but I think a lot of quarterbacks could have won as many games as Brock Purdy did if you give them the weapons, or if you give them the overall team that Purdy had around him. Arguably the best defense in the league, and then you have some of the best offensive weapons in the entire league. You're going to have a good team. There's obviously questions. What do they do with Trey Lance? Do they trade him? Do they cut him? Do they start him? Or do they keep the former number 3 overall as their third string? I don't know what they're going to do. And I'm also not super high on Sam Darnold. He could show out and he could be a good quarterback, but I also don't know. The hard part about this is I don't know who's starting for them, because it could be any 3 of those guys. But obviously, really good team, really good weapons. Will be interesting to see them this year. But I don't think they're going to win the division as handily as some people might think they will. Next, I have the Arizona Cardinals, who were 4-13 last year, which was 4th in the division. And this year I have them finishing 5-12, which is 3rd in the division. Now, the Cardinals and the next team I'm going to talk about, I'm not super high on at all this year. I think they're both going to be very bad. And I'll just be honest, the next team is the Rams. I think both teams are going to be miserably bad this year. They're going to be really, really, really bad, both picking at the top of the draft next year, which luckily for the Cardinals, they will most likely have 2 top 10, top 5, 6, 7 picks because of a trade with the Texans. But the Cardinals, I don't know what's happening with Kyler Murray. I don't know when he'll be back. But regardless of that, your offense, not super talented. Your offensive line isn't great. Defense has some guys I like. I love Budda Baker. I love Isaiah Simmons, Zaven Collins. But they're not going to win games on their own, you'd think. I'm still hoping for an Isaiah Simmons breakout season, because he was one of my favorite players coming out of his draft class. I think it was, 2021 maybe? I still have a lot of hope, but he could be cut. He could be traded. Who knows with this team? But yeah, I have them finishing 5-12 this year. My next team, like I said, is the Los Angeles Rams. They finished 5-12 last year, which was 3rd in the NFC West. I have them finishing 4-13 this year, and I think it could be even worse than that ultimately, which will also end up as 4th in the division. I am even lower on this roster than I am with the Cardinals, despite the Rams having guys like Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald. Because once you look past Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, and Matthew Stafford, what does that team have for talent? I mean, obviously these guys are talented because they made it to the NFL, but this roster is not going to win 8, 9, 10 games. They're not going to be anywhere near a playoff team. And I truthfully don't know if Stafford will be there at the end of the season, if he's traded or cut. Are they going to trade Cooper Kupp? Are they going to trade Aaron Donald and just try to get picks to try to fix this team so they don't have to be the worst team in the league every year for the next couple after they pretty much mortgaged their whole future for that Super Bowl? I think they're going to be really bad, and I truthfully think they have a legit shot at the number 1 overall pick, which, I mean, props for you. Get the number 1 pick. You can somehow get rid of Matthew Stafford, who, if he plays this year, I don't even know how good he's going to be after messing up his elbow last year and just not looking great. But yeah, Rams, 4-13 this year. Sorry to my friends that I have that are Rams fans. I think your team is going to be horrible this year. And lastly, in the division, I have the Seattle Seahawks, who finished 9-8 last season, which was 2nd in the division. I have them finishing 2nd again this year, but with a record of 11-6. I'm really, really high on the Seahawks team, especially after drafting Devin Witherspoon at 5 or whatever, really high in the first round. I think this team overall is really good. My biggest question mark, though, was last year a fluke season for Geno Smith? Can he maintain the level of production that he had last year and be a really, really good starter in this league, or is it going to be back to New York Jets Geno or backup Geno? I love Geno Smith. I love Kenneth Walker, Noah Fant, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think this offense could be stupid good this year, and I truthfully think the defense is going to be a lot better than people think it will be, especially with Tariq Woolen really showing out last season as a late-round pick. I have them finishing 11-6, like I said, second in the division. I think that's only, a game or two behind San Francisco. And I truthfully think if San Francisco's quarterback situation is bad enough, I think Seattle can win the division. I'm not saying they'll win by multiple games, but I can see the records flipping and they win 12-5. San Francisco goes 11-6, but I digress. Now moving on to the last division in the NFC, we are going to the NFC East, starting with the Philadelphia Eagles, who finished 14-3 last season, which was first in the NFC East. I have them winning the division again, but this time with a record of 13-4. I think that roster is still really, really talented. I think they're going to be one of the best teams in the league. I think Jalen Hurts is going to take another step up, and I think he will have an even more legit shot at winning MVP. I like a lot of their signings that they made this offseason. Marcus Mariota, obviously a backup, but still probably one of the better backups you could have. I like DeAndre Swift, who they traded for, Rashad Penny. I think that running game is going to be really, really good. I'm obviously really high on A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith. And then on the defense, I'm a Georgia fan, so I'm really hoping we get a Jordan Davis breakout year after not really playing a whole lot last year. I hope he's good. Obviously, Nakobe Dean, I like a lot. Keely Ringo, they drafted Jalen Carter really high. And I think all four of those guys could be legit players for them. And then I think it was yesterday, as I'm recording this, they signed Zach Cunningham and Miles Jack to one-year deals to kind of bolster up that linebacker group. But yeah, I think this Eagles team is going to be really good. I do have some questions about that shaky safety position, which I'm not really sure what they're going to do, but I think they'll still be really good. Next, I have the Dallas Cowboys, who finished 12-5 last season and were second in the division. And I have them doing exactly that again this year, 12-5, second in the division. I think this team's really good, but at the same time, I don't trust Dak Prescott. I think he's a good quarterback, but I just don't trust him when it really matters the most. There's a reason Dallas hasn't really won many playoff games, especially in his tenure as a starting quarterback. I loved them trading for Brandon Cooks. I loved them trading for Stephon Gilmore. I think that's going to make their team much better than it was last year, and their team's already extremely talented. But yeah, I don't trust Dak Prescott. I don't even know who their starting tight end's going to be. I don't really trust their tight end position, and I don't know how healthy Tony Pollard's going to be to start the season off, so I don't know how much I trust that. Obviously, they got guys, though, like Trayvon Diggs, who they just extended. Micah Parsons is a freak. DeMarcus Lawrence is awesome. This team is going to be really good, and I think they will give Philly a run for their money to win the division. Next, I have the New York Giants, who finished 9-7-1 last season, which was third in the division. This year, while a lot of people I've seen have them winning even more games, I have them going 7-10 and finishing third in the division. I'm not super high on Daniel Jones. I don't think... I'm more so... I'm not high on him anyways. I don't think he's as good of a quarterback as he's getting paid to be. And this whole Saquon Barkley saga that I'm not a huge fan of, I think they should pay him. But I don't know what this team is going to be like this year, because maybe Saquon gets hurt, and if he gets hurt, who do you have to run the ball? Like, I don't understand. I don't know what they're going to do with that. And I'm not super high on their cornerback group yet. I'm not super high on their safeties. I'm not super high on their linebackers at all, but I really like their pass rush, like Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari, stuff like that. I think they could be a good team. I think they could definitely win they should definitely win more than 7 games, but I'm just a bit skeptical because of how they're handling the whole offense thing with Saquon Barkley. Lastly, I have the Washington Commanders, who finished 8-8-1 last season and 4th in the division. I have them winning 4 games this year for a record of 4-13, finishing 4th in the division. I'm not high on this team, like, at all. I don't like a lot of what they have other than their defensive line is unreal. I think their defensive line is stupid good with Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, stuff like that, or guys like that, I should say. But I'm not a huge fan of their linebackers. I'm not a huge fan of their secondary as a whole. Those units as a whole, I'm not super high on. And I don't know how I feel about their offense. I don't think their running game is very good. I don't trust their passing options other than Terry McLaurin. And I don't know how much I trust Sam Howell to be their starter this year. But yeah, I have them finishing 4-13, last in the division. So now that I have gone through every one of the teams, we are just going to briefly go over my playoff standings. I'm not going to talk about each team individually. I'm just going to go 1 seed down like that. So at the number 1 seed, I have the Philadelphia Eagles with a record of 13-4. The number 2 seed, San Francisco 49ers with a record of 12-5. The number 3 seed, Green Bay Packers with a record of 12-5. The 4 seed, the Carolina Panthers with a record of 9-8. The 5 seed, Dallas Cowboys, 12-5 record. The 6 seed, Seattle Seahawks with a record of 11-6. And the 7 seed, Detroit Lions with a record of 10-7. And then going over the rest of the conference, from 8 to 16, we have the Falcons at 8-9, the Giants at 7-10, Vikings at 7-10, Saints at 7-10, and then the Buccaneers at 5-12, Cardinals at 5-12, Chicago Bears at 4-13, Rams at 4-13, and Commanders at 3-14. So kind of moving past that, as I just talked over, those are my playoff seeding. I guess that was more so just decided by the website once I got all their records put in. Some of those teams that are like 7-10, 5-12, you could flip them around. That's just kind of the order that the website had them in. But now let's take a look at my playoff predictions, because I'm going through the entire playoffs and into the Super Bowl. The wild card round, I have the Cowboys beating the Panthers. I think the Panthers could end up winning this game. I think it's not going to be a blowout, although it could be. I don't think it will be. I think Panthers will make it close, but I think Cowboys will win. And probably my biggest shock of the wild card round, I have the Seahawks beating the 49ers. And like I said, this all comes down to who their quarterback is for the 49ers. I don't know how much I trust. I just don't know how much I trust the position. I like their coaching staff. I like the rest of the team, but I don't know how much I trust the position. And I think the Seahawks could sneak one past the 49ers and win that game. And then I have the Packers beating the Lions. I mean, all 3 of these wild card games I think could go either way. But I think Green Bay will beat Detroit. Obviously, Green Bay is a better playoff team than Detroit, even though Green Bay themselves is not a great playoff team. Moving into the divisional round. As much as it hurts me to say this, I have the Cowboys beating the Packers. Aaron Rodgers, when he was with the Packers, made Green Bay Dallas's father. They owned Dallas for pretty much since I started watching football. But, I just think Dallas is an overall more talented team. And then I have the Eagles beating the Seahawks. I think the Eagles are just probably the most talented team in the league, if not one of the top 2 or 3. I don't know how close that one will be, but yeah, I have the Eagles winning. And then in the NFC Championship, I have the Eagles beating the Dallas Cowboys. So the Eagles will represent the NFC in the Super Bowl for the 2nd year in a row. But you're going to have to wait until next episode when I talk through my AFC record predictions and the playoffs, and then you will see who the Eagles will play in the Super Bowl, and I will give my way too early Super Bowl prediction. But that is all I have for you guys today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you all next time. Peace.